Hey y'all, Tanny Cooks here, and today I'm going to show you how to make the most absolutely delicious soul food sweet buttermilk cornbread. Y'all, this cornbread sits up like cake when you slice it. You're gonna love it, so let's get to cooking. To start off with, we're using buttermilk, sugar, all-purpose flour, eggs, yellow cornmeal, butter, baking soda, salt, and I like Kerrygold butter, and I have it in a mason jar to help it soften faster. My measuring cups and measuring spoons. So I'm starting off with buttermilk, whole cultured buttermilk. Be sure you don't get the low fat or non-fat. You want full fat. I'm using my OXO measuring cup, OXO. I like the way the numbers are on the inside so it's easier to see my measurements. I'm pouring 2 cups of buttermilk to let this come to room temperature before I make the cornbread. I also let my butter and my eggs come up to room temperature. So my butter is Kerrygold pure Irish butter. It's 8 ounces, so this is 2 sticks of butter. And I like this pack because it has the tablespoon measurements on the back if you needed it, but we're using the whole thing, so that doesn't apply here. So this Kerrygold butter is so rich and golden. I'm putting it in my 13 by 9 nonstick pan, and I'm gonna let that melt in the oven while I get my ingredients together. Only a couple of minutes though, so don't forget about your butter. So in a big bowl, I'm using 1 1/3 cup sugar. You can use 1 cup of sugar if you want it a little less sweet. I'm adding 2 cups of all-purpose flour. Notice the scoop in my canister. I'm scooping the flour into my 1 cup measuring cup. If you just take your measuring cup into your container of flour, it will probably compress the flour and you'll get more flour than you need, and your cornbread or your cake, whatever you're making, will be dry. So scoop it into your measuring cup. I have 2 cups of flour. I'm using 2 cups of yellow cornmeal. You could use white cornmeal. That will just impact the color of your final cornbread, but that's just personal preference. So 2 cups of cornmeal. I'm using a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. This is just regular Morton's table salt. So 1/2 teaspoon of that. I'm using 1 teaspoon of baking soda. I keep my baking soda in a freezer bag in the refrigerator so that it doesn't absorb any odors in the refrigerator. You can use name brand Arm & Hammer or store brand baking soda. It doesn't matter. Then we're going to mix all of our dry ingredients together to make sure it is evenly incorporated. All the ingredients are evenly incorporated. Next up, I've cracked my 4 eggs into a bowl so I can make sure there aren't any shells in it. And then I'm going to give it a whisk with a fork. I'm just stirring it pretty quickly for a minute or so until it gets a nice little foam on top. And then I'm going to add it to my dry ingredients. There we go. So I'm just adding all 4 eggs at the same time. Cornbread is pretty forgiving, so it's not as detailed as trying to make a cake, I would say. Next up, I'm adding my 2 cups of buttermilk, but I am adding the buttermilk slowly just so I can make sure that I can mix this all together without a whole lot of lumps. So just pour in some of the buttermilk and then give it a stir, and then pour in some more and stir. So I add my buttermilk in 2 or 3 pours. So it looks very clumpy, and that is to be expected. So I'm going to add the remainder of my milk. So it's all in there. And you can see how nice and thick that buttermilk is. Buttermilk will add a nice tangy flavor, but it's not super noticeable, but I notice it when it's missing. So I like buttermilk cornbread. Now I took my melted butter out of the oven. It's white particles in here. This is the milk solids in the butter, and there are some brown specks in it, kind of brown butter because I left it in there too long. And so you'll notice my butter is kind of brown, but that's okay. We'll see some brown specks, and that's just the delicious brown butter. That 2 sticks of butter I poured into my dry ingredients, egg and buttermilk, and so melting the butter in the 13 by 9 pan greased my pan, but then also it's adding the additional lubrication we need for our cornbread. So it looks like a lot of butter, but remember, we're gonna have 12 to 14 to 16 pieces of cornbread. It just depends on how big you want your slices to be. I'm actually slicing this into squares, and I'm just gonna do 12 big squares for my 13 by 9 pan. So I'm stirring this up until it's not lumpy. I get most of the lumps out, and everything looks evenly mixed and it looks glossy. So now my pan is hot, so I do have my pot holder, and I'm just pouring my cornbread into my hot greased pan. I'm giving it a stir just to make sure the butter is fully incorporated. Then I'm going to bake this at 350 degrees Fahrenheit until golden, about 45 minutes. And you can cook it till you smell it and it has your desired level of goldenness. I am smearing just a tablespoon of butter on top for some extra. And then I'm going to let it rest for 5 or 10 minutes before I cut it up. Now, if this is too brown for you, you can let yours cook until it's light golden, as I did here. Slice it up and look at how thick this cornbread is. It's thick, but it's soft. It's not dry because we have that butter and buttermilk. It is absolutely delicious. Now, some people may not like buttermilk, but you would still like this cornbread, I bet, because we have that sugar in it. So that sweetness balances out some of the buttermilk tang. I have my cornbread in a bowl because I'm going to let it stay in my refrigerator overnight because I'm making a special recipe next that requires day-old cornbread. So be sure to subscribe to my channel to see all my delicious soul food recipes and the next one coming up with this cornbread. Thank you.